Hello, you're watching PC Jack, and welcome to TechFlashback, a PC gaming and hardware news live show taking a look at the biggest stories of the last week. You're watching episode 8, and we've got a couple of interesting things lined up for today, and I think that's the first time in quite a while I've nailed the intro, so I'm quite happy with that. And it's even more apt because today we're actually going to be doing some live testing of a new piece of hardware I got sent the other day, which is this microphone from Payne. I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced, but this is the Payne K658. And obviously I've been testing it over the last couple of days, and I thought the best way to actually test a microphone is obviously just to do a live stream with it. So we're going to be trying it out over the course of the evening, and I think I've got it configured how I would like it to sound. If it's sounding a little rough in bits, let me know, and I can sort of make some tweaks as we go along. But I quite like it so far. Not to spoil the review, because it'll be going up later in the week. But it's quite good so far. It's for a brand I hadn't heard of before. It's pretty good quality, and the audio is quite nice. The RGB, you know me, I'm not that bothered about RGB, but it can be turned off if you press that. So it's okay, but I'll keep it on. I'll keep it on for the stream. I'm doing it for you guys. But yeah, so we got a good couple of stories to be covering in today's stream, and I had to scramble for our final story, which we are going to be taking a look at a couple of interesting things when it comes to the Xbox Bethesda showcase coming up next month, which I am extremely excited about, along with some news about the upcoming Ryzen 7000 series CPUs, which we should be getting very excited about, as well as a couple of other stories, especially when it comes to GPUs, but most notably, one that I had to kind of finagle into today's stream, is news about the the RX 6000 series refresh, which launched today. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. So I'm thinking we just get into it and see how it goes. Usually I like to start out the show with a bit of news regarding the channel. I think that's about as much news as we needed about me trying out this microphone, and hopefully it's going to sound nice as we go through the evening. Besides that, there's not been much going on over the last couple of days. You know, I've just been keeping busy trying to work on this week's upload and whatnot, which I'm hoping to get sorted by tomorrow, ready for Friday. But besides that, I've been cooking up some other stuff with the potential of PC Jack merch. I don't know if I mentioned this on one of the other streams, but it is something I am interested in taking a look at, and if I can get something sorted, then it could be something interesting to mark the 1,000 subscribers when we get there, which is looking fairly soon, I think, so fingers crossed. But yeah, besides that, there hasn't been much else going on with the channel. So the one thing I should address as well is that we had a bit of a mare last week when it came to Max Payne. Now, it was playing fine for me on my system, but for some reason, when you enter the cutscenes where it's just a static image, it would drop the frames, and then I'd get a message on OBS saying something encoder overloaded, and that was basically crashing the stream entirely. So we then switched to Hades, just because it was already installed, so I could make sure it's all set up fine, and we just played a bit of that. But then it got me thinking about what to do for this week. And one of the things I mentioned about last week was the fact that I'm not really game streaming as much. It's something I do more so on Twitch. And for TechFlashback, the gaming segment, I feel is a bit too disjointed from the rest of the show. So we're going to actually omit the gaming segment moving forward, and actually keep to something more discussion related, as I feel like it is more suited to TechFlashback itself and the format of the show. So we'll get to it later on, but we're going to do something else besides gaming. I feel it's better suited to the channel for now. Yeah, so with all that out of the way, I'm thinking we just get into the stories. And the very first story that I want to get into is this. Xbox and Bethesda showcase set for June 12th. So obviously the big thing that a lot of us are excited for, when I say a lot of us, me, I'm very excited for, is obviously Starfield. But if we just take a little look further in the article, so Xbox and Bethesda have announced that a summer showcase will air on June 12th at 10 AM Pacific, 1 PM Eastern, 6 PM UK. That's June 13th at 4 AM Sydney time. This showcase will include upcoming games coming to Xbox and PC, as well as Xbox Games Pass. Currently, Xbox's most highly anticipated game with a set release date is Starfield on November 11th. We'll almost certainly see first gameplay at the showcase, if it doesn't come beforehand. Arkane's Redfall is also scheduled to launch sometime in 2022, so a release date for it might be revealed as well. So, this should be very interesting, as I'm not quite sure if you've peeked at much news with regards to gaming over the last couple of months. Well, couple of weeks. Let's go by that. But it's been a bit dry. There's not been very much happening at the moment, which is fairly typical for this time of year, sort of April, May, because we are like, once we get into the summer, that's where things start to heat up quite a lot. And yeah, I feel we're really going to be in for a treat when it comes to Starfield, along with some other things. Like, obviously, we mentioned on there about Redfall has been something that people are very excited for. Some of the other ones we mentioned I thought could be potential as well. Is it mentions on here about Hellblade 2. That's something I really want to find out more about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do get more info on that as it comes along. And one of the other ones as well is obviously Avowed, which we've seen very little of. Obviously, that's by Obsidian, the guys who developed Fallout New Vegas, along with The Outer Worlds, if you're familiar with those ones. So hopefully they could show a little bit more of that. I know they did reveal The Outer Worlds 2 is currently in development, but I think that's still quite a ways away for the time being. But my big draws is obviously going to be Starfield. That's the one I'm the most excited for. But there is also rumors going around that there could be something Fallout related on the show. That is a little bit more swing and miss at the moment. I wouldn't be able to guarantee that. But as I think most of the people on this channel know, I am a bit of a Bethesda fanboy. So any sort of Fallout, Starfield, even Elder Scrolls would be something interesting I'd like to see showcased. But I still think we're still a long way off that at the moment. But if I could see, those are like my top three that I'd want to see some sort of information on. Not for information, well, anything, just anything to do with those games. But obviously, I am very excited because we're going to see something for Starfield. And I know that's just something that's just going to occupy my time for a significant portion of the winter, I would say. So, like, yeah, from November onwards when it releases. And I've actually got the week off that it's coming out for my birthday. So I'm going to have a very busy week plowing through that game. But yeah, so we got the showcase coming up later the next month. And it is looking promising because it's been really, just not much has been going on news-wise for games. But I'm just looking like it's going to change. And there is also the Jeff Keighley's Summer Showcase as well, which we could see some other stuff, but there's rumors that there's going to be a separate like teaser sort of reveal for Starfield at that event, because it's like 2 days before, I think. But as we get closer to the date, we'll take a little bit more of a look at both the Summer Showcase and the Xbox Bethesda one as it comes up in future episodes of Tech Flashback, or I may even do like a live stream coinciding with it, but I'll probably do that on Twitch if I were to do it. But it's something to be very excited about because we are needing some fresh games to get into, and more specifically in this instance, a lot of RPGs, which is something that I'd be very excited to get into. Yeah, moving on. Just that was the one thing I wanted to get across because that was one of the things that's kind of got me quite excited at the moment. But one of the other things that is getting me really excited right now is obviously AMD Ryzen 7000 APUs, which could boast Nvidia RTX 3060 performance. Now, if we consider the sort of performance we're seeing from the most recent APUs from AMD, which are going to be the 5600G and the 5700G. If you didn't actually see it, I did review the 5600G on the channel when it came out. And it's a very impressive APU for what it can do. And it was, from what I was getting in it, I was getting performance around the level of a GT, is it GT or GTX? So, about a 1030, about that sort of level of performance. And it was pretty good, all things considered. So, to see an APU that could possibly rival one of Nvidia's more entry-level cards, say entry-level, a 3060 is still pretty good performance-wise, but that is obviously on the lower end of their SKUs. But to be able to match, well, I said, like, to match that performance with an APU-only system is something very exciting. So if we take a little look in the article, we can see AMD's Ryzen 7000 APUs could boast integrated graphics that match the performance of an Nvidia RTX 3060 discrete GPU, according to reliable hardware leaker Greymon55. The company's new Phoenix chips will add RDNA-free GPU cores to notebook-style devices, enabling them to pack the gaming performance of a current-gen gaming laptop. So, there's a lot to unpack, but of course, this is coming from a leaker, so we do have to take it with a grain of salt, just to be safe. But, like I said, it is looking like it is coming from a fairly reliable source, and it doesn't sound too far off everything else we have heard about Ryzen 7000 series already. Now, there's obviously going to be some additional benefits we're seeing from there when it comes to the stuff like power efficiency, which we're going to see with a transition down to, is it going down to 5 nanometer now? It might say on here. Let's take a little closer look. So Greymon says the Phoenix Ryzen 7000 APU is equal to an RTX 3060 with a TDP of 60 watts. That is impressive in itself. The kind of dedicated graphics card you'd find in one of the best gaming laptops under $2,000. While the insider specifically compares AMD's next-gen chip to Nvidia's power-limited Max-Q GPU. It's still a potentially impressive feat, especially since the Red Team's APU will need to split power between processing and graphics cores. But, can you imagine the prospect of being able to build a, like, APU-only system with an RTX 3060 level of gaming performance? That is pretty absurd. But just put into perspective now, so if you were to build an APU-only system end of this year when these APUs would be available, you could potentially be looking at a really, like, high level of upgradability for that system. So if we think, right, you're going to start out either X670 or B650, yes, that's it. Those will be the new chipsets for Ryzen 7000 series. And then you get the, let's call it the, I don't know what the SKU is called. Call it the 7600G. Say that's what it's going to be called. And you got that. You can't get a GPU quite yet. And obviously, maybe we're still waiting on prices to come down a little bit more for RDNA-free GPUs and Ada Lovelace Nvidia GPUs. So you can get by pretty well for something that's going to perform along the lines of an RTX 3060 and consume significantly less power than a discrete GPU. And then give it like, I don't know, give it like a year, 6 months, and you can see some significant price drops on GPUs and think, right, now's the time. I'm going to drop in an RTX, what do we call then? 4070. Let's see, it's a 4070. And you get a huge boost to performance and not having to change a significant amount of your system. You would obviously have to spec for power consumption, which would increase. So as long as you make sure you like spec fairly wisely on a power supply, then it's still a pretty decent uplift you get in without having to significantly alter your system. That is something I'm very excited to see a bit more on. And it's one of the things that like Intel are going to have to try and catch up on, especially when it comes to their integrated graphics. I know XE graphics have come along quite well, especially with 12th gen, but like I did a video a couple of months ago playing, admittedly playing a fairly demanding title with integrated graphics on the 12600K, but even that was still slacking compared to the performance we get with something like a 5600G or 5700G. Now, there are still going to be limitations even for AMD's side for that, but it's still an interesting prospect to see the kind of systems that we could get away with, especially if you went more compact mini ITX. You could create some extremely powerful small form factor systems without the need for a GPU, and that'll help you save even more space effectively. It's getting me very excited to see what we are going to get from it. But the other thing to bear in mind as well is obviously the fact that like we are going to be seeing a lot more competition when it comes to GPUs. As we can see from this article here from TechRadar, AMD Ryzen 7000 CPUs could arrive in September to steal Intel's Raptor Lake thunder. So of course, we are looking like it's going to be seeing a bit more of Intel's Raptor Lake CPUs coming up towards the end of the year. Well, of course we will, because 12th gen came out, was it November, December now? I'm not 100% sure. So we are primed for some 13th gen goodness from Intel at the same time. And if we take a little look in this article, so AMD's next-gen CPUs based on Zen 4, presumably Ryzen 7000 models, could be launched as soon as September, if the latest rumor turns out to be correct. This comes from Digitimes, which cites the usual unnamed industry sources, so keep your skeptical head on. Naturally, the tech site is a bit hit and miss when it comes to the accuracy of its rumor mongering. Still, this doesn't seem like an unreasonable prospect, with the Grapevine already having suggested the possibility of a Q3 launch for Zen 4, and WCCF Tech, which flagged this up, also floats the idea that AMD may reveal Ryzen 7000 desktop processors at Computex, which takes place at the end of May, a rumor which has been around before too. But this is obviously going to be a really interesting time to be trying to get hold of a CPU, because if you think about what we were looking like, we go back to Ryzen. Let's go. We don't even have to go that far back. Go back to Ryzen 5000 series and Intel 11th gen. That was not a good. Well, it's a great time if you want to buy a Ryzen CPU, but Intel was not even competing with itself at that point. Like the flagship 11900K couldn't even compete with the previous generation 10900K. That's not good for competition in itself and for consumers. We want to be seeing more competition between brands, not between themselves. That doesn't make any sense. But of course, 12th gen was a massive turnaround for Intel, and the fact that each SKU is starting to like peek over certain SKUs from AMD, and we're seeing a decent lead in certain tasks, whether it's single-threaded performance or multi-threaded performance. And we're going to see the same thing, but even more intense when it comes to Ryzen 7000 series and Intel 13th gen. Now, of course, they're all going to have their own benefits. Now, these are rumors. I don't know if it's 100% true, but of course, AMD are going to be debuting Zen 4 on a DDR5 only platform. I believe that is confirmed. But there is some doubts about PCIe Gen 5 on Zen 4 at the moment. Now, I would argue I wouldn't be too concerned with that at the moment anyway, because Gen 4 is still got a lot left to saturate, even when it comes to GPUs and even storage in a certain sense for certain scenarios. So, but that is still an edge that Intel would have, because obviously they already do have Gen 5 support, and that additional boost in PCIe bandwidth may be a factor that will be interesting to take a look at closer to the time. But of course, then there is the added benefit that AMD is going to have now of switching over to an LGA socket now, and we can finally stop seeing the people pulling out their CPUs with their coolers, which has been a massive gripe of mine for goodness knows how long. But there's going to be a lot of benefit between the two brands, and rather than a year ago or however long where it was like, yeah, no, you need to go for Ryzen, Intel sucks at the moment, or no, you need the single-threaded performance and high clock speed. You need to be going for Intel for competitive esports and stuff like that. Now it's kind of like, take your pick. You really can't go wrong either way. And like my main system, Big Red, is using a Ryzen 3900 XT, and I don't really want to replace it, but part of me is thinking, ooh, like I'm getting that itch. You know, when a new generation comes along, you're like, right, maybe not. I don't know. We have to wait and see, but I also need content as well. So I need to be able to look at some new things. Either way, there's some very exciting CPUs on the way from both Team Red and Team Blue, which are going to be very interesting to take a look at over the next coming months. So, moving on, we're going back to a bit of a gaming story this time, and we're going to get to it after a little caffeine injection. I haven't figured out how to drink with this mic in the way. It's a little close. I'll adjust. It'll be fine. Anyway, Square Enix sells off Western studios and IPs, including Tomb Raider and Deus Ex, that's very weirdly formatted, but to Embracer Group for just $300 million. So, if you missed it, Square Enix, who owns some extremely popular titles, including Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Guardians of the Galaxy, Marvel's Avengers, a load of games, they've now sold to Embracer Group, which is not a group I was familiar with previously, but let's take a closer look. So, Square Enix has sold off its Western studios and over 50 intellectual properties to Embracer Group for just $300 million. Now, they keep emphasizing this just $300 million. But, of course, we do need to remember that only... How long ago was it now? It was January? February, maybe? That Microsoft acquired Activision in a... How much was it? I need to check this out. I'll have a look after. But I think it was a couple of billion, anyway. So, obviously, in comparison to this seems like peanuts, obviously. But anyway, the sale, which is set to go through by September this year, means Embracer owns Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal, as well as IPs including Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief, and Legacy of Kain. That amounts to around 1,100 employees. So, what does this mean? Well, one of the things that I was really quite interested about, especially when it came to a title like Guardians of the Galaxy, is there's going to be some sort of rearranging, and hopefully it doesn't mean that certain IPs get left by the wayside. Now, I highly doubt something like Tomb Raider is going to get left in the dust. That is literally one of their... Well, I would argue it is their biggest title, I would say. And of course, they are working on a new one at the moment. I wouldn't be able to give you much information on that because I haven't really kept track of Tomb Raider for a very long time. But there is obviously going to be certain changes to some of our favourite IPs. And also, it's an interesting trend to be seeing that we're seeing a lot more throughout the industry as a whole. And there's still a lot of rumours of various studios getting acquired by other large entities. Like, there's been a lot of discussions about Sony acquiring additional studios, because obviously they acquired Bungie as well a couple of months ago. And we've also got the talks about maybe Capcom being bought by Sony. So Capcom would be the Resident Evil franchise. And then even for Kojima Studios. So Hideo Kojima Studio for Death Stranding. I don't think Kojima Studios has Metal Gear Solid. I think that's still Konami. Maybe? I could be wrong on that, but I'm not 100% sure. But either way, they're one of the ones that have been thrown up about. Now, I would doubt Kojima is looking to sell to Sony with his fairly newly established studio. And I think he's trying to keep fairly independent. But I do know he's looking to do some sort of exclusive title. Maybe not exclusive, but something for Xbox, I think. I'm not quite sure what it is, but obviously Sony have been very protective of IPs, in particular for Death Stranding. Even though they have brought that across to PC, but they've still said some of the dynamics from that game, like the online multiplayer aspects with what's called shared paths, and I can spend a whole stream talking about Death Stranding, but there's a bit they've trademarked from Death Stranding specifically, so they can't use that on Xbox or PC in other games. Getting all this coffee down me, bloody hell. But obviously this is a trend we're still seeing moving forward into 2022, and there's arguments on both sides where it's positive or negative, and I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of that in the stream. but it was still something I thought would be interesting to draw attention to in this week's episode. But one of the more pressing news stories for me when it comes to gaming that I wanted to take a look at in today's stream, and it's to do with one of my most favorite franchises of all time, and something I'm hoping gets pulled off very well. So, the original studio behind Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is now in charge of its remake. So, if you haven't been following this, basically the Sands of Time game from Prince of Persia is getting a remake, and it's been going through a lot of changes by the sounds of things, and it just hasn't really been able to get much of a foothold over the last year or so since it was announced. And they have revealed some gameplay, and it was a bit divisive for some people. So, not 100% sure if things are going the right way at the moment, but of course, the idea of them going back to the original studio could make for a pretty interesting change to the game's development. So, if we take a look a bit closer into the article, in another entry for the story genre of games industry, apologies, delays delivered via text-heavy JPEGs, Ubisoft has announced that development on the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time remake has shifted from Ubisoft Pune to Mumbai to Ubisoft Montreal, the studio behind the original game. The message says that Ubisoft Studios will now take the time to regroup on the scope of the game to deliver the best experience for this remake of an all-time classic. So, of course, high expectations for this game. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, so I think we're all very familiar with this. Like, if you've ever seen a Cyberpunk delay from back in the day, we know what that is. But of course, there is a lot of skepticism about this remake, given what we've seen already of the game. And of course, there's going to be a lot of skepticism. This is an extremely beloved title from 20 years ago now. I believe that's when Sands of Time came out. Was this 2002? 2003, I think. Excuse me. But, of course, fans are going to want to see the best representation possible for an IP that they've come to love for so long. Now, I have other intentions of why I want this game to succeed. I loved back in the day, I loved the Sands of Time. Don't get me wrong, that was an awesome game. But the follow-up, Warrior Within, is one of my most favorite games of all time. So my expectations, my goals when it comes to this remake is that it does enough success. It has enough success to warrant remaking the sequel and maybe even the third one, Two Thrones. But Warrior Within is the one that I want to see. Now, I'd probably be even more invested in the quality of that game in wanting to ensure that it is actually an acceptable standard. And I don't think I'd be able to forgive them if they ruined one of my most favorite games. And it wouldn't be a good time. But, of course, we should have a bit more of a restored hope and faith in this remake now that it is going back to the original studio who developed it. And you would hope that they've taken some of the criticism on board that a lot of the fans have given based on the current state of the project. Well, I say the current state of the project. What they've shown, it's going on, it must be over a year now since they've shown off the gameplay. And they've got to know that the fans want this to be up to par, and they should be able to take that advice on board. That's the best way to develop these games, is taking as much advice as possible when it comes to the fans. To a reasonable extent, just a lot of unreasonable expectations some fans may have, but there are a lot of valid criticisms that you can get during the development process that they should take on board. And by the sounds of it, it does look like they are going to be doing that. So, fingers crossed, we do see something else of this game coming up fairly soon, but we want to be seeing it in the best form that it could possibly be. Now, before we move to the next title, see, I'll figure out this drinking malarkey with a mic right in front of my face. I'm not used to it. It's usually up here, so we can go over here. It's not as practical, so it's right there. See, it's right there. I need a helmet. What are they called? The things where you got the helmet on and you got the cans. I don't know how that would work for coffee, but a man can dream. All right. Anywho, let's move on to our next story. Wow, we're making a decent bit of leeway. I usually by this point we're nearly finished with the stories, but I got a lot to go through this week. So, this is one that's going to excite the ugly PC builds fan base, maybe. But let's take a look. So, Asus to release a new GeForce graphics card with Noctua cooling. Now, obviously, if you were aware, not RT. What am I talking about? Asus teamed up with Noctua a good couple of months back and created an RTX 3070 featuring cooling by Noctua. And the design is mostly the same as what we can see here. And it does look like they are going to beef it up a little bit for the RTX 3080, which of course is a little bit more power hungry, so it does need a bit more of a efficient, better cooling solution. So let's take a look on here, see if we can find out what we need to know about this. So, nearly half a year after the introduction of the first Asus graphics card designed with collaboration with Noctua, video cards needs to work on their grammar a bit. We finally get a new SKU. This time around, it's the GA102 base model, the RTX 3080. Interestingly, the company opted for the 10GB version, not the 12GB model that launched in January. Thus, no one should probably be saying that the 10GB model is being phased out at this point. No, obviously that's a very valid thing, because obviously there's been a lot of concern with Nvidia deciding to completely wipe the 10GB model off the market in favor of the 12GB model. Now, it is faster, the 12GB version, but the performance gain is not really worth the increased price. And I'm not quite sure what the 12GB are going for at the moment, but anyway. Going for the 10GB version is not exactly an issue. The card features a very similar quad slot cooling solution with two 120mm fans. Based on our quick check, both the RTX 3080 and RTX 3070 appear to be the same size. The cooling solution has not changed much, but the heatsink is obviously modified for a bigger GPU. And then we just got a couple of more shots of the RTX 3080 Noctua edition. Now, say what you want, there's going to be a lot of division amongst the PC master race, what we were going to call it, that a lot of people do not like the Noctua color scheme. That's just a given. That's not exactly brand new. That's not news. But I'm not quite sure why they started out with the 3070 version rather than the 3080. And based on the size of that cooler, like if we take a look again, this thing is an absolute chunk. There's no pictures of it in a system, because this might be like, I don't know if this is the 3080 or this is still showing no, it's supposed to be the 3080, but we'll see where that does actually become the case. But this is a chunky boy. You will be occupying multiple expansion slots. But it seemed a bit strange to go for 3070, which doesn't have as much of a demand for cooling compared to something like the 3080. Now, the 3070 it's not exactly like the most coolest running card, but it's using GDDR6 non-X memory, which is, for a start, going to be running a lot cooler than GDDR6X, which the 3080 has. And obviously, it's just a less cut down version of the GA102. I'm not 100% sure if the GA102 die is used on the 3070, but either way, the 3070 is not as difficult to cool as the 3080. So it's good that they're finally doing it now, but why was this not done in the first place? So of course I don't think it has been fully confirmed yet, but it's still going to be interesting to see whether this does come to market. Now, part of me would love to go for this, but I can't really justify it considering the fact that I've already got a 3080 FE. But the thing I am going to be interested in is just the actual future of this. Are we going to see more releases from Noctua with Asus? In particular, it would be interested to see a Chromax release, and I can guarantee that would be extremely popular. It will be interesting to see as we approach RTX 40 series moving forward now. And hopefully we'll see some more, as like the card, like we've already seen the cooling solution on it is insane, and I'm pretty sure they saw sorry, got a bit of a cough at the moment, that the card was barely peaking over 60C under full load, and it was whisper quiet. Obviously it's going to be because it's using, I believe it's the NFA 12 X25 fans from Noctua, which are like near silent under full like load anyway. So it did say on here the card can be found listed at 1150 euros, which is 250 euros more expensive than the RTX 3070. It's a little more expensive, but like I said, it says on here, Asus has thus far not provided any information on this model. So we'll have to see how it goes and see whether that does actually come to fruition. But I'd be interested to see if it does actually happen. So, moving on to our next bit of GPU-related news. That is, get it on here. Nvidia pays $5.5 million for allegedly hiding how many gaming GPUs were sold to crypto miners. Now, I hope I'm not the only one that doesn't remember that. Well, that does remember this. That the fact that back in 2018, 2017, with the previous mining boom, Nvidia was very clearly selling in bulk to miners, and they were caught out because they weren't reporting this to the SEC. They were reporting their general earnings when it comes to gaming graphics cards as revenue based on for gaming hardware, essentially, but failing to admit the fact that they were making a significant portion of their sales due to the just amount of cards they were selling to miners. So they got caught out, and it seems they haven't learned their lesson. Let's take a little look, see what else we can find out from this article. So, Nvidia will pay $5.5 million to settle charges that had unlawfully obscured how many of its graphics cards were sold to cryptocurrency miners. The US Securities and Exchange Commission announced the charges and a settlement with the company today. Its order claims Nvidia misled investors by reporting a huge boost in revenue related to gaming, hiding how much its success relied on the far more volatile crypto market. Nvidia isn't admitting wrongdoing as part of the settlement, but it agrees to stop any unlawful failures to disclose information. So they're saying we didn't do anything wrong, but we'll make sure not to do it in future. That's very strange. But this all ties back to now, if we think about how much Nvidia have been trying to say they're supporting gamers. Like they're saying, oh, we understand there's a huge demand for graphics cards right now. We know it's very difficult to get a hold of them, and that is down to the mining boom we're all in at the moment. Not so much currently, but we'll talk about it later on. So they said, so we love gamers. Gamers are our friends. We'll bring out the LHR series of RTX 30 series cards so that these aren't going to be appealing to miners anymore. We're doing this because we like gamers. So firstly, that's not good news for gamers anyway. Because as we've seen now, these hash limiters, these low hash rate limiters have been cracked. It didn't take miners very long. The thing you can't forget about, obviously you got your average person who's going to be doing a bit of mining on the side, or you might have someone who has a fairly low, what's the word I'm thinking of, like a fairly small operation when it comes to their mining farms. But a lot of these people are extremely large firms that are doing these mining, like setting up these mining farms. They have the manpower to be able to come up with cracks to disable these kinds of blocks that Nvidia are placing. Now, these aren't hardware blocks, like we were led to believe on certain ones. Especially on the 3060. We were told it was going to be a hardware block. It wasn't. It was literally driver-based, which is absolutely rubbish. So that's not an issue. LHR does not solve the problem. And then secondly, the average gamer who's trying to recoup their loss on buying a graphics card used to be able to do that by mining they're like, say, so I've got my RTX 3080. I could say I wanna make back the money I paid on this card by mining it for 6 months, something like that. That kind of mining I don't have a problem with, because it's an individual who is trying to earn back the money they paid on their card in quite a simple way, which isn't really affecting others, essentially. But obviously, it's the people who are buying in bulk and setting up these huge systems and ASICs to actually try and just mine as much as possible. Not to recoup the loss on anything because they just want to use it for gaming. They're just in it for the money, essentially. But anyway, so all of that stuff that Nvidia said about how much they love gamers and how gamers are their true friends, you know, they don't care about the miners. They want to help you guys. So we can all agree that was just a load of bollocks, right? Good. I'm glad we've cleared that up. But anyway, what are the implications of such a settlement they've reached? Firstly, 5.5 million is pennies to Nvidia. Is that enough incentive for them not to continue doing this? No. Not at all. That is a minor roadblock for them, which, like I say, a roadblock, that's like a minor speed bump that they aren't going to have much issue with tackling because they're driving in a full military range vehicle, which is not going to have a problem with a bump. Might be a bit of a weird way to describe it, but it's true. So we're going to see some further issues where they're reporting their earnings for the last couple of years now, we've seen. Because it's very clear that they have been helping miners a lot more than gamers. And of course they would. They are a business at the end of the day. They are going to be trying to make money. That's all a business is going to want to do. But as we can see, there is going to be a significant drop-off in mining, with Ethereum dropping in value quite a lot at the moment, along with Bitcoin. But I argue Ethereum is the main one that people have been mining with at the moment. And they're going to want to be gamers' best friends again after that, which is going to be very interesting to see how that fares. Now, of course, things could change as we head into a next generation of GPUs, but only time's going to tell on that, and also whether Nvidia are going to pull their fingers out their arse and not pull these kind of shenanigans. My money's on, yeah, they're probably going to do it again, but can you blame them if they're only getting, like, fined pennies in their own scenarios? Still, interesting to know how much Nvidia does actually care about gamers at the end of the day. Anyway, we are moving on to our penultimate story for this evening, and that is, if we pull this up, Intel Arc A series graphics cards delayed. What a shocker. I think we've come to expect this by now. Company confirms, citing software readiness, launch rescheduled for late summer 2022. So if you didn't know already, Intel is planning on launching their first lineup of discrete GPUs specifically for gaming, and they've gone through that over the last year now with the Alchemist GPUs, Druid, Battle Mage lineups. And obviously, I think Alchemist is the first we're going to be seeing, and you see a little teaser there of the reference design. But they don't want to release it. But we're still in the dark. We're not really sure, like, if we're going to see it anytime soon. They said like late this year. I don't know whether that's going to be a guarantee. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. But let's take a closer look. So, that's covered up. Intel's VP and GM of Visual Compute Group, Lisa Pierce, has confirmed in a blog post their Arc A series graphics cards have been delayed due to software readiness delays. This confirms what we had posted yesterday about Intel's Arc lineup getting delayed to mid or late summer 22, which is now officially confirmed by the Blue Team. So obviously they're blaming issues with, I'm assuming, for like driver support and along the lines of that when it comes to software. But we've been seeing a lot of delays from Team Blue when it comes to this, and I would really quite like to actually see these cards come. They're due. Like, they were due a very long time ago. And the problem we're going to see with this now, so say these launch late this year, and based on some of the leaks we've seen, I'm thinking that their flagship could at least perform along the lines, or maybe even outperform a 3070, which is, if they did achieve that, that would still be a pretty interesting result nonetheless. But the 3070 came out nearly 2 years ago by the point this is coming out. So it took Intel 2 years to catch up to not even the flagship from Nvidia. But then later this year, we got 40 series. We got RDNA 3. So not only is Intel not able to compete with the current generation that it'll be launching under, but it's going to be just about competing with previous generation, which is not a good position for Intel to be in with their first lineup of GPUs. But one of the other problems we have as well with this is that there's even the prospect floating about that Intel are going to launch this exclusively for China, which is already like a bit of an issue. But I really want to see some more variety in the market as is at the moment, and to be able to see something from Team Blue could offer a good solution when we're already seeing an issue with supply, which is improving thankfully, but they don't want to show up. And hopefully we get some better news over the next couple of months when it comes to Intel Arc. But for now, it's not looking as promising as we would like to see it. But could be after the summer, you never know. But fingers crossed. Let's see how it goes. So I think it's time for us to get into our final story for this evening. And that is, this is one I really scrambled to put together for this evening. So my sources or knowledge from what I've seen today may be inaccurate, but you can correct me on it if I'm wrong. Literally, I've been in work all day, and I was only able to I had literally played a benchmark video on my way home from work in the car to listen to the basic review and like consensus on it, as well as reading some articles. And of course, I am talking about the RX 65, no, not 65, the RX 6000 series refresh that launched today. So AMD launches Radeon RX 6950 XT, RX 6750 XT, and RX 6650 XT graphics cards. Now, these have been long rumored, and they have finally come to fruition, and they are now out in the wild. In fact, I haven't even checked if I can see one available. That'd be something worth taking a look at. Let's take a look. If I go on, let's take a look at scan. I haven't actually taken a look yet to see if they are available in the UK. Let's take a look. AMD. Oh, yep, they are showing. So if I can pull these up on here if anyone wants to take a look. Yeah, that's it. Let's take a look at these. Here we go. So yeah, they've got them on here. They're available in scan, and they are not out of stock. Well, at least the 6950 XT isn't. There's a good couple here that are available to buy, and they're going for about £1,100 on in the UK. Let's take a look. Oh, I think I highlighted all of them. Let's take a look if I can get to the 6750 XT. There we go. Yeah, you can get 6750 XTs for around 600 or under. That's pretty impressive on the Red Devil, though. I was expecting that to be a little bit more, because the 6700 XT Red Devil was about £700 for a long time. But, wait a second, that's a bit strange. So you can get the 6700 XT for more than the 6750 XT. That's a bit strange. But what about the 6650 XTs? What we got? And they're cheaper than these. So like, yeah, there's clearly some like issues with the pricing on these. So if you want to be getting one of these cars, now's the time. But of course, we need to talk about performance first. So obviously these launched today, and they are better than their counterparts, but by a very slim margin, I have to say. And the general consensus we've seen amongst reviewers that I've seen so far, as I've seen so far, I haven't had as much time as I want to have gone through this, but the consensus is that there is a significant increase to power in order to drive that extra performance. And the increase in power is not equivalent in proportion to the performance gained, which is obviously a bit of a shame. As RDNA 2 was renowned for its power efficiency back when it launched back in 2020 by now. And obviously, it's been a bit of a secret car for them to hold on to until the 3090 Ti shown up. And then they were like, well, how about we drop the 6950 XT, which is actually on the same level or even faster at times than the 3090. How long they were sitting on that, I do not know. But the thing we have to find out about is exactly how well this thing performs. So, like I said, I didn't get a chance to look at much for the 6650 XT or the 6750 XT, but I listened to Gamers Nexus's 6950 XT review, and he was looking at a Sapphire model, but while it was a good piece of engineering based on what he's seen so far, and the cooler had been designed well, it is a bit of a toasty card because obviously it is requiring a decent amount of power, and it was drawing, I want to say, about just over 400 watts at stock. No, was it 400? But it was a significant amount compared to what we've seen before, and the performance gain was not really there. There was an uplift, but it wasn't justifiable for the price increase we were seeing. Now, based on what we were seeing now with Scan, that might not be the case for the UK. What we look at that compared to the 6900 XT, so the 6950 XT is going for £1,079. What about the 6900 XT? See, I think we've got a bit of a disconnect here in the UK. There might be something going on. So some of what we're talking about now may not be as applicable if you're in the UK, but it's still something you have to bear in mind if in the US or other countries. But let's try and see like what we got on here from the actual reviews themselves. So, of course, they've launched the RX 6950 XT today, along with the 6750 XT and the 6650 XT. God, that's going to be an absolute mouthful. But just to compare it to the 6900 XT, they're fairly close in certain specs. Like you can see on here, they're using the same amount of CUs, ray accelerators, stream processors. There's a bit of a boost to the actual clock speeds they are getting with this, and they have managed to actually increase the memory bandwidth of these cards. So we are seeing 18 gigabits per second compared to 16 gigabits per second. So that's going to be one of the benefits we are seeing when it comes to the actual performance gain that we're seeing. And obviously, like I said, they are bringing up the power a fair bit on here as well in order to actually maintain that performance. And this is going to become a common theme we're going to be seeing with a lot of these more higher end cards moving forward, especially when you've seen the size of these coolers they've used for the 3090 Ti. Like, EVGA even but it was included an anti-sag, I don't know how to describe it. It was like a crane. It was literally like sort of like wire that you hang from the top of your case and connect it to your GPU, and that's what stops it from sagging. Now, I think not Gamers Nexus, it was Jay's 2 cents used it, and it didn't really make that much of a difference. But still, the fact that it is a thing is more concerning. But as you can see on here as well, the MSRP is about $100 more compared to that. Obviously, this is for the reference design. So AIB models will vary a little bit, as we just saw in the UK, especially on Scan. But let's take a look if we can find some sort of performance results on here. See, this is why I meant about not being as prepared as I wanted to be with today's news. But the gist is we have seen for the 6950 XT is that it does outperform the 6900 XT in a lot of titles, which is, of course, the main draw of the card. There's going to be a refresh. But the more interesting aspect of it is, of course, that it is outperforming the 3090 in a lot of titles, and also going toe to toe with the 3090 Ti. 3090 Ti is still coming out on top in most scenarios. It's going to, based on how much power that is consuming, and it does have the additional support of a much better memory bus as well, and obviously it's got more memory. How much memory has this got? It's got, yeah, the 6950 XT's got 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 non-X, and then of course the RTX 3090 Ti has 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory. I can't remember the actual speed on that memory for the 3090 Ti. It's kind of escaped me a little bit, but either way, the fact that this is trading blows with the 3090 though is very impressive in itself. But should you be buying this for gaming? Probably not. There are edge cases we can see for why you would need one of these flagship cards, and the biggest thing that I would say you should be aiming for these cards is always going to be for productivity tasks. Now, if you can utilize that additional VRAM that isn't quite as useful for certain gaming titles, especially say you were using much more VRAM intense applications like Blender, doing a lot of 3D CAD work, stuff like that, then of course that is a slightly better solution than going for something like a Quadro, because there is a whole different debacle with that, trying to deal with Quadros in your own system. But we are edge on the thing, I think they know who's going to be buying these kinds of flagship products, and it's going to be the people who have the money to spend on that, and there is a bit of bragging rights depending on who you speak to. But at the end of the day, you can see very little gain from a 6800 XT up to a 6950 XT. So is that extra couple of £100, dollars, wherever you are, going to be justifiable in the long run? Probably not. Same thing when it comes to the 3090 Ti and the 3090. Now, I would argue that you are much better off going for a 3080 if you're only going to be gaming, maybe say obviously 4K especially. But the added benefit of 3090 with its increased memory capacity and everything else is not going to be that beneficial to what you're going to be doing gaming wise. Not all the time. Of course they are going to outperform certain titles, but is it going to affect your enjoyment of the game that much, knowing you're missing maybe the odd frame or two? I'd argue not. But of course they do have a place, and that is something that AMD and Nvidia always rely on. But should you go for a 6950 XT? That's the bit I was kind of torn on until I looked at Scan, and now I'm thinking, well, maybe that argument is slightly invalid if we take a look again, because we're seeing that you can get a 6950 XT for cheaper than a 6900 XT. So that argument's kind of gone out the window a little bit. But that might be just in the UK, and of course this is day one and these could disappear, we don't know. But you never know. I'd be interested to see how these fare over time, and they are launching in a window that is very brief in between generations, as we are expected to see RDNA 3 and RTX 40 series within 12 months. So the lifespan of these cards is still a little limited, and only time will tell. Maybe when we see some more price drops, we'll see a bit of a different reception to these cards. But for now, though, the reception isn't as impressive as you would like to see for them at the moment. But there is a slightly different discussion to be had when it comes to these cards now. And that is the fact that these cards launching at a time where GPU availability is actually improved significantly well. Not amazingly, but it's better than what it was previously. And there is now the argument you can make that you can say, well, maybe it's not justifiable to go for 6950 XT, but you get a 6800 XT because they're in stock and they're not priced as ridiculously as they were previously. Same goes for the 3090 Ti. You may be able to see, oh, well, you can actually get 3080s 10 gigabytes, the ones people like, at a more reasonable price. Like, I think I was seeing some 3080s going for about £800, maybe even 700. I can't remember off the top of my head, but you can buy them. That is the point. put yourself back about a year and you'd be looking to, if you want to buy a card, you'd be thinking, well, can I get a card? Well, no, probably not. But if you want to get the card, you have to buy this right now. You have to be like on the dot. You have to have your phone ready. You are going to buy that regardless of whether you think it's the right card for you. You don't get that chance to actually sit down and do your research. Nvidia is launching this card the same time as the reviews. You haven't got time to look at a review. You just got to sit down and you got to buy that card and hope for the best. Those days seem to be a little bit behind us, I want to say. But this could change with the next generation, of course. There'll be an increased demand because everyone wants to go for the flagship. It's all new and shiny. That's what everyone loves. But it's still interesting to see that they've decided to do this refresh, up the price at the time when prices are going down. So, do I have high hopes that this series is gonna, like this refresh, is gonna fare that well? Not really, but it's adding more variety, I suppose, which is something that's always interesting. Maybe it'd be a bit more appealing on the lower side of the stack, looking at the 6650 XT. So maybe you were thinking, I'd maybe want to go for a 6600 XT, and I can get a 6650 XT with the added benefit of a slightly faster memory bus, as well as an increased clock speed. Maybe I'll go for that. Maybe you can swing it if the price is justifiable. But the one thing, and like I can't verify this again, like I said, because we're still, I'm going off of reports that I've seen in between working in my normal job and trying to get ready for tonight's show. It was a tweet from, I think it was Buildzoid. I don't know where he took the screenshot from, but basically it was in regards to overclocking on the 6650 XT. And the fact that it is slightly limited in the fact that it's what was I going to say? The power limit is maxed out of the box. You cannot change the power limit. You are going to be severely limited in that case in how much more you can actually OC this card and get more performance. And I don't like to see these at least power limits just disabled, because it is obviously like there's not as much performance to be gained when you are power limited in that sense. And I saw the same thing on a couple of AIB models of the capsule, like when I was looking at the Gigabyte 3070 Vision. That didn't have, you couldn't increase the power limit on that, and it was a bit limited in how much you could up it up a bit. And I mean, you maybe could edge out a bit more performance if you just increase your memory speed a little bit, perhaps. But your core, you're not going to get much more out of that without maybe going for a modified VBIOS. But that's a whole different ball game. But anyway, the 6650 XT, depending on what model you are going to go for, is going to be a bit limited in how much you can tweak it, which is obviously one of the things we all love to do with these cards. Well, at least I know I do. I like to be able to tweak the cards and do a bit of overclocking and see if I can get any more performance out. Will you get that much? Maybe not. It might depend what you're going to play. But I do like to have that option there. And to see that option stripped is not the best. So, only time's going to tell on these, but I'm hoping that we'll see some price drops across the board for all SKUs at the moment, as we're already seeing. And fingers crossed, by the time these next generation of cards come around, we should see a plethora of cards to choose from. Unless demand suddenly shoots up from the next generation. But there we go. What can we do? Anyway, that was the final news story for this evening. And like I said, we are going to be changing it up slightly this evening, and we are omitting the gaming section from like we did previously. Like, I don't think it fits in as well. Like, I think it takes the whole momentum of the stream down when we just go, right, we're done it with the discussions, we're just going to go straight into a game. And especially when it's a game like Max Payne, which completely demolishes the OBS like encoder. I don't know why it was doing it. It just killed the stream. So we're keeping things going with a bit of a discussion, and it's something I want you guys to step in with if you want to like have a chat and see what you want to do. But the one thing I want to chat about was what hardware you're excited about and what I'm excited about for the rest of 2022. I don't think it's going to come to anyone's surprise that my number one most hyped up product that I'm desperate to get my hands on for this year is the Steam Deck. Now, I am in that queue. I got my reservation in. I can't remember when it was, but it definitely wasn't day one. So I'm down for Q3 of 2022. And based on, I think on Steam it said that it's going to be between July to September. If I'm lucky, I'm hoping. I don't know. But it hasn't changed much over the last couple of weeks. I know they are making some decent progress through the Q2 pre-orders at the moment. So I'm hoping that it's towards the earlier part of that time period, around July to September. So I've gone for the 256 gigabyte model. I could have gone for the 500 one, but I felt like, well, I can get an SD card to buff up my storage a little bit on there, and I'm not really gonna have that many games loaded up on there simultaneously. Because I'm quite excited to just try it out just for the playing a lot of my older games, which obviously won't take up that much storage. So the 256 gigabyte one is probably sufficient for what I'm going to use it for. But of course, every week, Valve are keeping on top of this so well. They're updating it not day by day, but there's a lot of updates going out for this. And there's just new things being discovered about it all the time, which is really strange. And obviously, it's coming more from the fact that it's possibly the least lockdown handheld you can get. Well, you can get. If you can get in on the pre-order queue anyway. And I found out the other day that the Steam Deck actually has BIOS flashback, which is something I never would have thought about with the Steam Deck. Obviously, the main thing we think about with BIOS flashback is when it comes to upgrading your CPU because your BIOS is out of date. Not going to be a thing you can do with the Steam Deck. At least I'm pretty sure the CPU soldered on there. But could be interesting, of course, if you are experiencing any sort of difficulties and you need to try and figure out any technical issues you're having with troubleshooting and just want to update the BIOS to try and solve a problem. But you can do it. You can do it via BIOS flashback, which is not a feature I would have expected to see on it. And I'd like to see how easy that is to actually do. I'm sure there were some people that were saying it was fairly straightforward, but I'll believe it when I've seen it in person, perhaps. Not that I'm going to be rushing to update the BIOS on my Steam Deck, because the potential for bricking it seems... the risk outweighs the reward, I think, on that point. So I wouldn't want to be rushing to do a BIOS flashback on a Steam Deck. But anyway, the fact that there are so many new features that are, there's things that are getting changed, they added support for, I want to say, for 40 Hz refresh rate, which doesn't sound that appealing. But if you think about certain titles where you're not really striving for high FPS game titles, it doesn't matter. But having that 40 Hz refresh rate is obviously going to be useful in order to actually help with any just sustaining the battery life on that device. So it's very exciting to see in that regard that they are keeping on top of it, and we're not seeing a repeat of what happened with the Steam machines where they were kind of just abandoned. It just didn't really pick up. So if Valve can actually keep the mind to actually stick with it, as we would like to see, they have done obviously they stuck around for the Valve Index. That was hugely popular, hugely expensive, I want to add, but they stuck with it on that, and that's not what they do all the time. They do tend to give up on things sometimes, which is not ideal. Another example is the Steam controller. That's it's gone the way of the dodo right now, and you can't get one anymore unless obviously you buy one on eBay or something like that. But I really do want to see this Steam Deck succeed, and of course I do need to get my hands on one to be able to give much more of a better opinion on it, because I've never touched one in my life. But based on the reports we're seeing from a lot of other people, they're all getting on with it really well and think it's the dog's bollocks line. So I just really need to get my hands on it and just see what it's all about for myself. I'm even more excited, not just for the like the Steam UI that they've integrated, of course, for making it a bit more simple to navigate for playing your games and stuff like that. But just trying out Steam OS on a handheld as well, and maybe even trying some more non-gaming tasks. Like I could dock it and try see what it's like just for basic productivity. I can't see myself doing much video editing on it, if truth be told. But I'd still be interested to try it out. Maybe I could do like a video where this might be a little bit ambitious, but like, what if I didn't use my desktop for like a week? I just relied on the Steam Deck to do all of my desktop tasks. It might be a little bit optimistic for certain things, but it could be an interesting video. Try it out. I still want to do like this is leaning more so on a project I've had, and it's not even a project, just something I want to try out and see if I could do it. But at the risk of angering a community would not be ideal. But I do want to try and do some sort of like more Linux-based content. And one of the ideas I had for that was just literally just changing my my boot drive to a Linux-based OS. I think Pop OS, I quite like that. It either be Pop OS or Linux Mint, but trying to stick with it for like a month, but for everything. Now there are going to be limitations for that. Not so much for gaming. I could probably get away with it for most of the games I play. There's a really decent level of support, especially through Proton, which you wouldn't have to worry about then. But my main issue is going to be for Premiere. Premiere Pro just does not work on Linux. So I would be losing support on that. So what if I could transition from, I know this has changed from Steam Deck to Linux, but it's still related. If I could maybe transition to DaVinci Resolve, which I did try before, but I didn't have much luck. Maybe I'd have better luck in the future trying that, but it'd be an interest. I don't know if I could do that in one video though, or whether it would have to be a series. But based on some of the the community response to like how people deal with Linux problems, it's a very I don't want to say gatekeepery, but there is a bit of a strong community that will not appreciate you having valid criticisms of a Linux OS itself and beginner questions, I want to say. But I would feel there are some communities that are going to be obviously a bit more forgiving in that regard, but it is still something I'd have to contend with if I was going to do any sort of Linux-based content. But back to the Steam Deck, of course. It does seem that the Steam Deck is actually going to be helping a bit in that regard, especially when it comes to Linux, driving home Linux as an OS you can use every day. And there is still issues we are seeing, especially like more considered for the Steam Deck in regards to anti-cheats, especially for Valorant. I don't think you can play Valorant on the Steam Deck because of who is it that does Valorant? I can't remember now, but they've got a very particular DRM in place, which makes it very tricky for what DRM? Like just like an anti-cheat that will not work on the Steam Deck. But that there is some developments on that, I think, where they are looking to actually improve it for the Steam Deck and make it actually viable to play on for that. But still, might be a ways away. But they're rolling out updates really frequently, so it's not as if like you're going to be like stuck out for a very long time. And if you stick with it, you will end up have a very capable handheld device, something that's performing along the lines of like something like a PS4, which is even more impressive in itself. And I want to play some heavy hitters on it. I want to play Red Dead on there. Like that'd be insane to be able to play that on a handheld. Maybe not quite to the standard I would expect from a desktop experience. But either way, it's still a very exciting prospect to be able to play something like that on the go. And my main hope is, of course, like it's a bit bad for me because obviously I'd be missing out because I already have the Steam Deck, so I wouldn't want to get another one. But if they follow this up with a Steam Deck 2, and what direction they could go with that, and provided Valve stick with it, we could be in for the long haul as a device that is going to be very competitive when it comes to not just the handheld market, but the PC gaming market as a whole. as well as consoles. And that is something that I'm going to be very excited for. Right. I am going to have to cut it off by there, I think, but I think it's a nice little added extra to the stream we can change instead of like a gaming section. I think the gaming section might draw it out a little bit too long and disconnect from the rest of the stream, but that little discussions is like it's like a bit of a cool down after a run. You just you've done your very intense part, not intense, but you've done your part, and now you just want to like wind down with a bit of a little discussion on something just to chill things out. So I think we'll do that again for next week, but we'll change it up, of course. It'll be for something different, so it's not going to be the same, like talking about the Steam Deck. I am going to find another talking point, and we'll follow that up in the next episode for next week. As well as, of course, all the stories that we're going to look at, which I'm very excited to find out what they'll be, because I have no idea what we're going to talk about next week. Just have to see how the rest of the week fares. So yeah, that's it for Tech Flashback Episode 8. If you enjoyed it, then please feel free to like and subscribe, and also make sure to check out the rest of the videos on the channel. If you enjoyed the stream, then make sure to come back for Episode 9 on Tuesday next week at 7 PM BST. And yep,